We've already covered a pretty good amount of ground today talking about changes in the market, some opportunities for new construction, some do's and don'ts with that. And what I want to talk about now is pricing and pricing strategy, and I want to talk about price reductions. I think we as a market, as a population of people, need to kind of let go of this notion that if you adjust your price, something is therefore wrong with your house. It's a bad house. Something's wrong with it. That is not true. It can be true at times, but I think, and I'm not sure when it happened, but at some point, homeowners began to believe that as soon as they reduce their asking price, blood is now in the water and the sharks are going to start circling. So I want to talk about that, and I want to really help you guys understand the reality of pricing in this market. I was having a conversation with somebody that I've worked with for the past, 15 years. They own a large portfolio of properties. I helped them acquire a significant portion of them, and now they're looking at divesting, or they're looking at their portfolio and they're saying, all right, which of these investments is performing in line with market expectations? Are there any that are overperforming? Are there any that are underperforming? If there are any that are underperforming, what would it look like to sell that property through something called a 1031 tax deferred exchange and essentially transfer my equity to a different, better income producing property? In other words, how do I optimize my portfolio? And at times, does it make sense to sell something? And so we were just talking about, the changes in the market over time, and, that we're just not in 2021 anymore, right? We're working with buyers that are very value-based, right? They're negotiating, they're taking their time, they're asking questions, they're going to see the house 3 to 4 times before they make an offer. They're getting a bunch of inspections done. I mean, in other words, they're acting like the buyers used to act before the pandemic. And honestly, that's normal. But one of the hardest conversations that I think we have with sellers today in this market is helping them understand that their competition isn't what your neighbor sold for 4 years ago. Your competition is what's available this weekend. If there are 5 similar homes for sale to yours, buyers don't care what one sold for during the hottest market in American history. They're looking at the 5 homes they can buy today, and they're asking which one gives me the best value. That's the question that determines your sales price, not nostalgia. And here's another thing that's changed. Obviously, buyers are way more payment conscious. They're looking at the monthly payment and they're saying, can I actually afford this? They're factoring in insurance and the potential that that insurance might continue to go up like it has here locally for the past several years. They're looking at taxes and HOA dues and utilities and maintenance. So when a home is priced too aggressively, buyer don't just like shrug and make an offer anyways. They don't even schedule the showing in many instances, right? That's a huge difference from a few years ago. And so what we'll see many times with a property that's overpriced is within the first 7 to 10 days of it being online, we'll have a lot of people that will view it and save it. And so on the surface, it looks like, hey, we've got all this online traffic, which is great, but you need to make sure that that online traffic transfers into showings. Otherwise, I just kind of chalk it up as, hey, it's a really pretty house to look at online, and I'm going to click that little heart button that saves it so that once they actually make some sort of change, I'll be notified, and then we can start to take it a little bit more seriously. But basically, a save for a lot of folks is a watch list. It's a, hey, I want to know when that property gets more realistic on their price. And so that's a big difference from a few years ago. And at the end of the day, the market speaks first, right? Not me, not Zillow, not your neighbor, not what you hope your house is worth. The market tells us what buyers are willing to pay. And if the market isn't responding, it's giving us valuable feedback. Too many sellers interpret the feedback that we get emotionally. And I would prefer that they treat it more like data. If your home has had dozens of showings and no offers, that's data. If you have a ton of online traffic but very few showings, that's data. Now, one thing that's nice for us is that in our market, whenever we're listing a home for sale, we have, and I've mentioned this before, but we have a third-party company that schedules all of the showings for us. So I go online, I select the homes that I want to show a client and the day and time that I want to show it to them. And then this company basically just handles everything. It's a concierge service, and all real estate agents use it. Well, almost all real estate agents use it. But the point in telling you that is that anytime there's a showing recorded, it becomes a data point that I then get to use in my conversations with my clients. So when we sit down and we're talking about the process of selling their home, one of the very valuable data points is, what are our expectations with regard to how the market should be responding to our property once we put it on the market? How many showings on average are other properties that have sold getting per month? How many showings on average did it take before they went under contract? And then how will we compare to those data points? So all of that is information. Again, the market speaks first. The question is whether, we're listening, right? And so the good news is that well-priced homes in Charleston are still selling. We'll have some data here in a few weeks from the company that we've hired to provide us with some data points that just aren't available from our, association or from the MLS, because there's a lot of data they give us, but not some specific data that you really want. Like, what is the impact to the seller's bottom line of overpricing your home versus pricing it in line with fair market value? What happens when a property reduces their price more than once? How much of a price reduction should be taken in order to be consistent with the market? All of these data points are really important, and it takes a little patience for you to have a conversation with a competent, experienced, motivated real estate agent in this market to kind of, hopefully they actually have these data points and they're talking you through the reality of the market. But honestly, far too often, we're seeing folks that are working with agents that come in with like a printout, which is a one sheet of, hey, here are all the addresses, bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, and average price per square foot. And so we think that you should be somewhere in here. It's a really kind of lazy way of interpreting the value of something so expensive. Whereas with me and with our team, we're going to take individual adjustments into account for things that you have that your competition doesn't, and vice versa, just like an appraiser would. That's, to me, what makes sense, and that's why our pricing, more often than not, is accurate. But this market is a weird market. Inventory is ebbing and flowing. We've had a lot of distractions, right? Politically, not distractions, but we've just had a lot of action, right? It's been a busy year so far. And it's caused a lot of people to kind of sit on the sideline and wait and figure out what in the world's going to happen. But I think when there's chaos, there's also opportunity, which is why there are some great deals out there. There are some great opportunities for sellers to get top dollar for their house and then go and get a great deal on something they can buy. And that for people is exciting. It's, that is a reason in and of itself to maybe explore the opportunity in the market opportunistically. Not everybody that moves has to move right now. So, you've got the opportunistic folks out there that say, hey, if the right thing or the right opportunity came along, yeah, I would very seriously consider it. And so that's when we start getting into things like pocket listings and off-market properties and, all these different strategies. And at the end of the day, solutions that we can provide for people. But in regards to pricing, and just getting back to, the center line here, a lot of people are still missing the mark, and it's costing them money. Out of every 100 properties that list for sale in Charleston, 27 of them fail to sell. They expire after months on the market, or the seller fires the agent, or the seller decides not to sell it. They can't get the price they want. Whatever reason, fill in the blank, they take the home off the market. So basically 1 in 4 homes gets on the market, comes off the market. Of what's left, almost half are selling without a price reduction, and they on average are getting 100% of their asking price in 7 days. In fact, a third of those homes are getting over asking price. And then you've got the other half of the homes that sell that end up taking a price reduction that weren't priced correctly from the beginning, or maybe they just had high hopes that someone would come along and there'd be some negotiability, right? Because a lot of sellers are saying, well, hey, let's give that buyer that feel-good, feeling of negotiating against us. But if you're overpriced to the point where you're not generating the interest and able to capitalize on those opportunities, then you're not really gaining any ground. And so for those that have to reduce their price, they are taking significantly less. There is a price reduction penalty essentially that they're paying. But on top of that, it takes 10 times longer almost to sell the home. I think it's actually 11 times longer, close to 80 days for homes that had to reduce their price to end up selling. And they end up selling for like 91 or 92% of their asking price. I have to look at the specific numbers. That's off memory, but that's essentially what happens. So pricing isn't always going to be what you want to hear. It's not necessarily going to be consistent with what we saw several years ago in the hottest real estate market the country's seen for a very long time. I'm not going to say in totality, but in a very long time. What you need to look at what's happening today. Who are you competing against today? What is a buyer looking at today and comparing my home against, and how does my value stack up against theirs? If you'd like more information on that, when we come back, by the way, I want to talk about what I believe is going to be one of the biggest wealth transfers in American history, and why millions of baby boomers and baby boomer owned homes are, I think, going to reshape a large portion of the real estate market, not just nationally, but here in Charleston over the next 2 decades. So if you want to reach out to me, you want to talk about what your home is worth, you want to learn more about what some of these incentives are with some of these different builders out there, or just talk shop, find a way to maybe make your plan make sense and look for some opportunities in this market, happy to help in any way I can. My number is 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com.